You and I were born on an impossible island. Local folklore purported that when seen by the gods, the island drew a perfect circle in the sea. Trained skeptics set out to disprove this superstition. First they counted paces, and somebody invented a device that could properly validate their findings. Someone elsewhere was launched into space. Evidence came down from international committees suggesting that the island was not quite a circle. There were irregular masses stretching out into the ocean. This forever sabotaged the national psychology. Revisions were brokered for the national flag. Parliament discussed renaming the island from Reglatug, which in our language meant circle, to Reaticus, which in our language meant here. A revolution spread westward and defeated these ideas. Men were killed for using the new name in a song. The PhDs who preceded me were made to use protractors, watched over by a soldier who covered his face. But you and I were born in the decades of forgetting. The priestess told us at our wedding that our grandfathers were generals and had fought on opposite sides of the war. After their campaigns, order was restored to the capital city. We took our firstborn daughter there so she could see the graveyards. We buried our legs in the sand. The summer I found work at the National Academy. They uncovered latent metals in the silt of our lake beds. All this improper planning brought the island new prosperity. Refugees from other islands aimed their boats at our beaches while we took that little house on the shoreline I had promised. You saw it in the background of a bicycle commercial. We made love for the first time in 16 years while outside. The sounds we made in coupling were lost inside the waves. We both voted for the man who promised us modernity. Attended speeches that were heard on every island in the chain. The year I got ill at the family reunion, he set about the task of rendering the circle. Phil from poorer islands was lifted in by planes. Crowds gathered at the pier to watch the workmen smooth the edges, brought roses for their wives and fresh breakfast every shift. Our largest corporations paid the ancillary costs. Old colleagues from my college days engineered the dig. The young man we voted for was voted in again. In the 5th year of the digging, I lost my sense of sight. I sat in my deck chair and listened to the workers. Our cities were congested by counter-demonstrations. Certain elements complained that the work was too expensive, that some of our bird life would be lost to the project. The year we bought the walker, they finished the circle, shot a man into space to bring back photographic proof. The book of his life story has been adapted into film. You keep it in the living room to read to me at bedtime. The shoreline has since been moved far away, but in the lonely afternoons I sing towards the waves. Oh, my voice, my people voice, come find me. Thanks, everybody. I've been here all weekend, and I've seen everything. Done the whole... People have walked up to me on the street to offer me extra poetry just as I've been walking around. I've had everything. I saw the slams. I saw everything. This is a wonderful festival. A huge list of people to thank for it, but I'm not going to go through them all one at a time. As a representative, thank you, Megan, for having me and for everybody who works with her. So I don't want to lie to you. This book is something of a downer. I thought I'd butter you up with a love story first, but it's not, doesn't end well. Let me check my phone here so I know the time. Sorry about that. Take a guess. Okay. I'm what's known as an aerophobe. People know what that is? It's very thankfully not being afraid of the air, but it is being afraid of airplanes and riding on airplanes. And I'm getting over it, and I can travel by planes. No one should ever sit next to me, but I can do it. And this book is both a symptom and a cause of that, I think. I was born in Nova Scotia, just south of Halifax. When I was a teenager in September of 1998, Swiss Air Flight 111 went down right outside my bedroom window, and I always knew that this book was going to happen at some point. So it's about grief, it's about small towns, and I always like to read from this book when I'm in a small town. It's about the representation of small towns by themselves and how grief works as a social experience. And I'm just going to plow through it. I originally didn't even deal with the actual accident and just started sort of afterwards, like the next morning. But an early editor made me start with the actual thing, and I'm glad that he did, because I think the book is better for it. So it's dedicated to that early editor who is a mentor and a friend. So this is for Dennis Lee. The ocean sings of incendiary things. To begin with, it was beautiful. A solar flare, a break, and the beacon speak of lights. All seabirds and sailors blinked in perfect unison, from chutzpah to flail, from hum into sizzle crash. The come apart was counterpunch. The wheeze of pressurized air was heraldry, a droop in the fuselage that focuses the heart. Now come marauder, come meal, be erected in their honor. Come reducer, sob machine, emperor of sulk and sunlit private moments, reckoner, decision, come sprinkle your storyboards across their country notions, the friendliness exhibit zeroes in. They'll see parts of you in beaver dams, pocket lint, school lunches, come berate their histrionics, but before that, come be heard, be soluble, smothered, pulled apart and pummeled clean, come retrieve your beauty. I believe in beauty, in the wish-thin packaging and pander of the word. I got an email last year from someone who is also an aerophobe, but much worse than me, and can't sort of. She takes like the bus to Vancouver and stuff. And she does the cognitive behavior therapy where you sort of get closer and closer to it. So one of her lessons was she had to memorize this poem and read it to her therapist. Hopefully that wasn't the first step. That there's like a toy airplane in the room or something first. You work your way up to it. Two theories of the impact. One, that the problem first burrowed in unbroken underwater, minus the wings and other peripherals unsuited to the shift in local gravity. The pressure differential drew a plan for its attack, then kicked out the windows, stippled down the vessel's length along its open pores. Thereafter, certain objects could see where they stood, and the sudden cartoon logic forced the interloper open at its seams, then at its seams. Down this insurrection, the breaking gained momentum and surprised the unbreakable. A bolt, its head shorn free from the shaft, a crumpled metal found inside a crevice carved from bone, an air bubble burping at the surface, an oil slick, and 6 or 7 seagulls squawking through the din. 2. That at a certain speed, the salt and ocean water coalesces into concrete. At a certain speed, spun momentum can churn objects into dust that embraces itself as a death rolls down the sky. This is why they never found a piece of the wreckage too heavy to be hauled from the water by hand. Most of it escaped microscopic, lifted on the wind and carried a cloud blind towards the shore. We call this theory immediate translation. And it predicts that the first island in will get infamous. So no Mounties, but still, one morning that winter, a man we all knew woke up, shot his 2 young sons in their sleep, shuffled back to tell the wife, the shotgun's languid afterbirth folding smoke into the carpet. The wife has moved to the mainland. She hangs out at the hairdressers making conversation. She'll catch the young sailors as they try to slink away, hold their scared new heads in her hands. You look good, kid, handsome. Everybody's at their best today. Just at lunch, it was mentioned sort of divisions between. I love small towns, and whenever I'm in one, there's other things happening in this book and the other book, but I wanted to focus on this because of it. There's always sort of little classifications in small towns and huddles of people that do and do not interact with each other. That doesn't happen here, though, right? I meant except for here. Anyway, this is about one of those groups. Songs for the cool kids in towns without traffic lights. Those who arrived with graduate degrees ready to lie fallow on the land and fashion subdivisions out of dormant fields. Those who could speak with some detachment about the famous local facial features imported from Europe and left to fester through centuries of stubborn interbreeding, noticed the pronounced zygomatic arches in the straightened simian jawline. Those who looked in from the periphery of raucous public meetings who voted every time but never saw a single leftist get elected. Those whose children grew up in the back rows of civics classes, who slouched in tourist coffee shops shone on by cable TV, who bought imported music and couldn't believe their bad luck when, for all their practiced nonchalance, the visiting media, whose names they knew, would always pull from the crowd the most toothless authenticity available to pester with questions engineered to pinch the face of the catastrophe. Yes, sir, I'll talk a while. Are you here to ask about my zygomatic arches? Irish. In that semester of the airplane, we started learning genealogy. I remember being disappointed that my ancestors weren't aristocrats, that they traced themselves through Europe as ghosts of ethnohistory, part of the crowd in the crowd scene. Lost within the lithographed trajectory of battles so thick they bent the borders of other nations at their hinges, attack, defense, a pause to allow the cartographers their survey, the date labeled bold in the bottom left-hand corner and all the normal New World escape routes, New York, Chicago, the Mississippi, the St. Lawrence. What is it we hope for when we ask about our histories? A picture frame, a map of the world with our bodies as equator, as meridian, as mirror. A mourner met me on the sidewalk the week of the memorial, told me he thinks he has Canadian roots, like that's something that exists. I dug out a recently retired $2 bill. They don't make these anymore. Have it. He put it in his pocket, let it lead him down the street. This is another mourner. It's also a true story. The mourner with the Alabama plates. How far were you willing to come by car? The airline offered freebies and your brain shuffled back to its assurances. It is X times more likely to die by lightning than by flight. Still you thought, no thank you, and invested in an atlas. Check in at the inn, meet the fishermen who set out in search of the survivors, meet their kids. Go speak to the women, they know idioms. They make you dinner that requires 8 pots to prepare. Blend your brown passport into the scenery and stand beside the lighthouse where you watch the people stand. When someone asks you your relation to the lost, say, brother. When they check your name against the list, say, in-law. When they question your intentions, hold up your St. Christopher and wait for signs of storm. Grief is not composed of grief. Grief is a compulsion. Walk up to the dead and lay your body on their bodies. Imperial. It's our fault we built ourselves, so indivisible and soft, a gloss along the landscape 1 molecule thick. The plaques we built onto our buildings were bitter and illegible. Under dust and ancient typefaces, they weathered their predictions, said airplane, said rebranding, said don't take your names for granted. We deserve what came to render us its afterthought. Our public faces press the land into a photo of the land that we locked inside a frame, our houses in their poses, our posted histories, 47 facts about life in former times. What could we build that would have withstood such a shockwave as the one the plane became? How many coats of white paint on our walls would it take to stand up to its demands, its forced redistributions? 2 photos of a lighthouse set square on fading newsprint. A lighthouse, a lighthouse. The eye adrift, looking for the differences lost between the two. So, sort of the source text of a lot of this is the official Transport Canada Swissair report, which is a couple thousand pages long, and I'm proud to admit that I only read it 3 times. If you ever want to read something to put you to sleep because you can't sleep, but then also give you nightmares to wake you back up again, recommended. Poets think very highly of sort of not blinking and kind of staring at something until you're done with it. And I think the people who wrote that did that. We don't think of them as heroes, but I think it's a heroic text. The lead author was a man named Vic Gurdon, who was the local office in Halifax's Transport Canada sort of head. He moved to Winnipeg right after finishing the report. This is for him. I think he's a hero. Mr. Meticulous teaches us a lesson in bravery. A wave flattens out for a flicker at its apex, an implaceable blip of no slope. So short, its very naming is a hyphen branch to its history. We lose it again before we finish with the word. Men set out with science to establish the precise moment of the plane's recommitment to the surface, minute, second, parts of the second so thin they reach out from the uncountable to appear in the problem as wind conditions, as the tension in the pilot's right hand. Men set out in mid-September, came home with salt stains on their gloves. Then they sold their houses, sprawled out into the country like cracks. How are we doing here? Not bad. I'm going to close with two more about this book and then move on to some newer poems as well. Not too many, don't worry. I run a reading series in Toronto all the time, so nestled just a half step behind just like coming up here and just swearing at everybody would be going over my allotted time, because I take that very seriously as a reading host. And I have a giant hook at the side and just pull people over. I lent Megan my hook today, so I don't want to. So the book ends with a number of, instead of like narrative poems, sort of more philosophical pieces about the kind of recurring motifs in the book. One of which is names, naming things, and one is the vector field, which is kind of, if any oceanographers in the house, no? Okay, good. That's good, because I don't have to worry about getting this wrong. Essentially like a pattern of jet streams and river currents and water currents and ocean currents sort of, compiled on the world. And they both join their name with the name of the book. Names folk. That the words that pull things free also bind them to an ancestry, an air corridor, a stream for jets. The mnemonic world waits for you to trip into its story, that every sense of danger is just instinct learning when and how to interrupt your thoughts and curve against your voice box. That our history books are essential texts, but not to the study of history. Flashbulb psychophysics narrow their wide eyes to this, that the patterns we've been hoping for are not the payoff. The payoff is in pacing off your own backyard and accusing the neighbors of infringing on your land. I'm not suggesting this to lessen the impact of the losses. I'm asking what is nested in the scar of their retreat. This is also the last poem in the whole book. It begins with an epigraph by Theodor Adorno. Everything that has ever been called folk art has always reflected domination. Vector field folk. Source and sink. That each association gleaned is just the spherical, allowing us a peek inside its head. That no one made us ready for the speed the earth was moving, something kept us sheltered from the spin, that there are ancillary lives on the surfaces of solids, a Coriolis effect to the tragedy patterns, that we can claim homes without knowing the birthplace of the lumber that plays hostess to our story, the species of grass seeds scattered on the lawn, map the air around the wingspan, pull the wind into a sock. We can study and be honest. We can opt for better answers, humanism, godlessness. We can loop our finer points into a brainwave to replay them, but the where of us will always win. The where of us will always win. I'm just going to close with a couple newer poems. Thanks, everybody, for all this. This has been a great weekend. I'm going to be a new dad in February. Thank you. I'm really excited. My wife is 6 months pregnant. This poem was in a magazine in Toronto called This Magazine. It's like a politics and sort of current affairs magazine. So I also consider it the public announcement of our pregnancy. Fertility. We were bored with ourselves, so we made another self. And the city sprouted urban renewal signs to notice us. Our posture fonts established. The mayor made his case for moving west but couldn't shake us. Your father said he never noticed the present growing worse, but he noticed the past was getting better. So buy in with me. Come closer. We have this unmade bed. We have this unmade bed, and our employers have our fingerprints. So this is my last one. Is there a Boy Scout troop in Durham? Is that a thing here? Does anyone? A lot of people aren't sure. It's like I can tell this is that other group of the people in this town. Is it like a gardening club? I was a Boy Scout, and all the way from like being 5 to I was a leader when I was in college and stuff. I left. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. After sort of various news stories that came out about 10 years ago. But I really appreciate it in a lot of ways. The history of the Boy Scout movement is interesting. Sort of turn of the century when it was founded in the UK and then imported to what they would call the colonies, even though they weren't anymore at that point, but they probably still called us that. Back in 1900 or so, the initial sort of generation of it was a lot more pointedly militaristic in its approach and style, and you still see pieces of that, uniforms and uniformity more broadly, but it was there a lot more at the time. And then the founder, and a really interesting character, Baden Powell. So all these kids grew up in the early 20th century, and the military was sort of something that they really idolized, and they all promptly marched off to war in 1914. A lot of them died. And he got sick in 1918 and had this high fever for weeks and started to hallucinate. And one of his hallucinations was this image of sort of these waves of recently deceased young men from all over the world kind of descending on him to kill him. And he went a little crazy. He got out of it eventually and improved and pointedly changed sort of the tenor of the organization. I really enjoyed the slam team yesterday, and this is my most performative poem, so I want to close with it as an homage to all the spoken word people who we've had the pleasure of joining with this weekend. And like most spoken word poems, it's set in northern France in 1918. I met you halfway. The Fever Dreamer. I have made the boys, Baden boys, Britannia boys, I have made them cruel and handsome, made them march in single file back straight, sleeping on their haunches like new carnivores. I have taught the boys to take the waste from their lives, to cure their spit-clean trousers of mange and leg and mittens. I've had my boys go post-European and sew their pockets shut. I have beaten boys. I have whipped their face with eyebrows. I have singed their shirts with steam and broken out the laxatives. I have proctored international, made and been remade by boy. I have told the boys I want them. I want them for king and kaiser, want them Lusitania and Sinosaurus tensions, want them cradle of statecraft and Metternichs and mob, want armament contracts for agreed upon fathers, mothers who would pack mule pamphlets into bedrooms, the boyish yes of Oxford Press, printing in 3 weeks why we are at war. I have become the boys' sincerity, their sweated out details. I have boxed the boys, bent them at their waists, and wound their backs for marching. If you scratch my surface, I will be the boys' defense. I'll settle their wounds with the good news of field dress. I will wear them hats. I will tie them heads to handkerchiefs. You'll taste how I have egged them on, how I fed the boys provisions. In those first provocations of Union Hall and Field, I've shown them the fruitful economy of hunters, bought them the blades for first shaves. With the saccharine blood of their comeuppance, I have calmed them. I've shown them to suckle on the nearest teat to tongue. I've left them to tend to these friendships in dark habitats. The boys, as boys, descend on repertoires of bravery. I know I bring it up again, but look at what they're wearing. Observe the benevolent cotton at their necklines, their badges and banners torqued into hieroglyph. Boy at swim, boy at camp, boy against the outline of the nation that protects him, boy using arrow, boys embraced around a flame. I apologize to Europe for the invention of the boy. I did not design them to be tyrants or marauders. I didn't dream them up to die. I demanded of boys that they drift in mythic packs, wicked on the scent of antagonist or sibling. I regret that climactic lifting of the fence, the appeal to factor in the fattened hearts of kings. I have brokered boys, bankrolled their littleness and lust. I've erected border towns both between and inside them, built hives in their minds free from history. Cornered in this keyhole nightmare of Brittany, I've engendered all the boys as brood and as bereavement. Call me Piper, boogeyman, but it is true I made the boys. I have made the boys bewildering. Thank you.